Imagine a cold November morning. The year is 1864. The sun is just beginning to rise over the frozen plains of Colorado. In a small valley, hundreds of people are sleeping in their tents. Men, women, children. Above the largest tent, a flag is waving in the wind. It is not a flag of war. It is the American flag. It was given to them as a promise of safety, a promise that as long as they flew it, no soldier would harm them. But promises in the Wild West were often written in sand, and history is often written in blood. What happened next wasn't a battle. It wasn't a war. It was a descent into madness that would stain the soul of a nation forever. To understand the horror of Sand Creek, we have to look at the greed that fueled it. Just a few years earlier, gold was discovered in the Rocky Mountains. The cry of Pikes Peak or bust echoed across the East Coast. Thousands of miners, settlers, and opportunists flooded into the territory. There was just one problem. The land belonged to the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes. It was theirs by treaty. It was theirs by right. But gold has a way of making men forget their laws and their morals. The settlers didn't care about treaties. They wanted the land, and they wanted the savages gone. Tensions rose. Skirmishes broke out. The newspapers in Denver began to fan the flames of hatred, calling for extermination. In the middle of this rising storm stood a man of peace, Chief Black Kettle. He was a visionary leader of the Southern Cheyenne. He saw the wave of white settlers coming, and he knew that fighting them was a war his people could not win in the long run. He wanted to coexist. He wanted survival for his children. Black Kettle did everything the U.S. government asked of him. He signed the treaties. He gave up vast amounts of land. He camped exactly where the military told him to camp. He was told by the officers at Fort Lyon, "Go to Sand Creek. Raise the American flag. You will be under our protection." He believed them. He trusted the honor of the uniform. But while Black Kettle was preaching peace, a monster was gathering an army in Denver. His name was Colonel Chivington. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a former Methodist minister, a man of God who had turned into a man of blood. Chivington had political ambitions. He wanted to be a congressman, perhaps a governor. And he knew that in the climate of fear in 1864, nothing won votes like killing Indians. His philosophy was brutal and simple. In a public speech, he famously said, "Damn any man who sympathizes with Indians. I have come to kill Indians, and believe it is right and honorable to use any means under God's heaven to kill Indians." When asked about the children, he replied with a phrase that chills the blood to this day: "Nits make lice." Chivington assembled the 3rd Colorado Cavalry. These weren't disciplined soldiers. They were volunteers, drifters, miners, saloon brawlers, men recruited with a strict deadline of 100 days to fight the hostile savages. They were poorly trained, heavily armed, and eager for blood. They called them the 100 Dizzers. They spent weeks drinking and boasting about the scalps they would take. They didn't care which tribe they fought. They just wanted to fight. And Chivington needed a victory before their enlistment terms expired. He didn't look for the dog soldiers, the warrior bands who were actually fighting settlers. He looked for the easiest target he could find. He looked for the peaceful village of Black Kettle. On the night of November 28th, Chivington and his 700 men arrived at Fort Lyon. The officers there were shocked. They told Chivington that Black Kettle was peaceful, that he was under army protection. One officer, Captain Silas Soule, stood up to Chivington. Silas Soule was a true hero, an abolitionist, a friend of the famous John Brown. He told Chivington that attacking Sand Creek would be murder, a violation of every military code. Chivington was furious. He threatened to court-martial Soule. He shook his fist and shouted that he wanted blood. Soule had a choice: obey orders and commit a massacre, or refuse and risk his life. He and his men mounted their horses, but Soule made a silent pact with his conscience. The dawn of November 29th was bitter cold. The Cheyenne camp was beginning to stir. Women were preparing fires. Children were playing near the creek. Suddenly, the thunder of hooves broke the silence. 700 cavalrymen appeared on the ridge. They positioned 4 howitzer cannons overlooking the village. Inside the camp, panic erupted, but Chief Black Kettle remained calm. He was sure this was a mistake. He ran to the center of the camp. He raised a large American flag on a long lodgepole. He tied a white flag of surrender beneath it. He shouted to his people, Do not be afraid. The soldiers will not hurt you. Look at the flag." He stood there, under the stars and stripes, waiting for the officers to come down and talk. The talk never happened. Chivington gave the order, "Fire." The cannons roared. Grape shot tore through the teepees. Rifle fire rained down on the village. It wasn't a battle. The warriors were few and poorly armed, mostly with bows and old hunting rifles. Most of the men were away hunting. The camp was full of women, children, and the elderly. As the people fled into the dry creek bed, digging into the sand with their bare hands to hide, the soldiers charged. What happened next is difficult to describe. It wasn't just killing. It was butchery. Soldiers chased down toddlers and shot them. Women on their knees begging for mercy were executed point blank. Amidst this hell, there was one island of sanity. Captain Silas Soule and his company of men sat on their horses. They did not fire a single shot. Soule ordered his men to stand down. They watched in horror as their fellow soldiers turned into beasts. Chivington rode by, screaming at Soule to engage, but Soule sat like a stone statue. He was witnessing a crime, and he refused to be part of it. This act of defiance was one of the bravest moments in the history of the American West, but it would cost him dearly. Meanwhile, in the creek bed, the slaughter continued for hours. I will spare you the worst details, but you must understand the depth of the depravity. Chivington's men didn't just kill, they mutilated. They took scalps not just from the heads, but from other parts of the bodies. They cut off fingers to steal rings. They committed unspeakable acts on the bodies of women. By the time the smoke cleared, over 150 Cheyenne and Arapaho lay dead. 2/3 of them were women and children. Black Kettle miraculously survived. He managed to escape into the ravines. His faith in the white man's word shattered forever. His wife was shot 9 times, but amazingly survived. They vanished into the winter storm, leaving behind the ruins of their lives. Chivington returned to Denver as a conquering hero. The newspapers hailed the Great Battle of Sand Creek. They reported that 500 fierce warriors had been killed. They lied. They claimed the soldiers fought a brave battle against overwhelming odds. The city threw a parade. And here is the what the fuck moment that shows the true darkness of that era. During the intermission of a theatrical performance at the Denver Opera House, Chivington's soldiers walked onto the stage. They didn't display captured flags or guns. They displayed the severed body parts of the Cheyenne women and children, the scalps, the trophies of murder. And the audience, the civilized audience, they applauded. They cheered. But the truth has a way of surfacing. Silas Soule could not stay silent. He wrote a letter to his superiors in Washington. He detailed every crime. He named every officer who participated. His testimony was explosive. The U.S. government launched an investigation. Congress was horrified. They called it a foul and dastardly massacre. The nation turned against Chivington. The hero became a pariah. But Chivington had already resigned from the army, so he could not be court-martialed. He faced no prison time. He faced no execution. He simply walked away, living out the rest of his life, claiming until his dying breath that he had done the right thing. But what about the hero? What about Silas Soule, the man who refused to fire? In the movies, the hero gets a medal. In real life, especially in the corrupt West, the hero gets a target on his back. Weeks after testifying against Chivington, Silas Soule was walking through the streets of Denver. He was on duty as a provost marshal. Suddenly, shots rang out. Soule fell dead in the dust. He was assassinated by an associate of Chivington. His murderers were never brought to justice. The man who tried to save the soul of the army was killed by the very system he tried to protect. The massacre at Sand Creek didn't end the war. It started a fire that would burn for decades. The Cheyenne, who had been peaceful, realized that peace was impossible. They joined the Sioux and the Arapaho. The Dog Soldiers rose up. This trail of blood led directly to the Battle of Little Bighorn and the death of Custer years later. It was a cycle of violence birthed from betrayal. Black Kettle, the man of peace, was eventually killed by Custer's men in another dawn raid 4 years later at the Washita River. He died as he lived, trying to find a way to coexist. We often look back at history and talk about civilization versus savagery. At Sand Creek, under the shadow of the American flag, the lines were drawn clearly, but they were drawn in reverse. The people labeled savages were the ones who kept their word, who flew the flag of truce, who tried to protect their families. The civilized men were the ones who butchered children for applause in an opera house. History is usually written by the winners, but the earth remembers. The wind at Sand Creek still whispers the names of those who were betrayed. If you believe that the truth matters more than the comfortable lie, hit that like button. Share this story so Silas Soule is remembered and Chivington is never forgiven. And subscribe to the channel, because next time, we're going to talk about a gift that was actually a biological weapon designed to wipe out a nation. You don't want to miss it. You might think that after the government admitted it was a dastardly massacre, justice was served. You would be wrong. Not only did Chivington never spend a day in jail, but 20 of his soldiers were awarded the Medal of Honor for their actions at Sand Creek. Yes, you heard that right. The highest military decoration in the United States was pinned on the chests of men who butchered women and children. And despite decades of protests and the admission of guilt by the U.S. Congress, as of today, those medals of honor have never been revoked. They are still officially listed as heroes. What the fuck?